Melee weapons in Team Fortress 2 are awesome. Usually pulled out as a last resort, it's no wonder as to why so many melees in TF2 seem to have an insanely high crit rate. But what's better than winning a melee fight with a random crit is winning a melee fight without one. Just your precise timing and your melee. So this week, let's honor those melee kills by looking at my top 9 favorite melee weapons in Team Fortress 2. A few things to keep in mind before we start though. 1. As the title implies, this is my opinion. So don't take this list as factual because I'm telling you right now, it's not. 2. Notice how we're counting down from 9, which means I'll take my favorite melee from each of the 9 classes and rank them accordingly. And 3. No stock melees, because then 4 placements on this list would be stock, and that's no fun. So with all that said, let's get to the countdown. Although I literally never played Demoman, back in the day, Demoman was my favorite class to play all the damn time, specifically Demo Knight. I would always get my charge and charge on and equip my trusty K Eyelander. This thing is awesome. You do start with 25 less health, and you can kiss those random critical hits goodbye, but if you're using this the intended way, with a shield and with either one of these suckers, the downsides are practically phased out, and you're left with a completely awesome sword that has a wicked long range and decapitates your foes. I mean, the Nessie's 9-iron does the same exact thing along with every other sword that the Demoman has, but I would much rather decapitate my enemies with a haunted sword than a golf iron. Moreover, did I also mention that with every person decapitated you gain a slight but noticeable health and speed boost? No? Well, I got news for you, because that's just what happens with every decapitation you get with this sword. The health and speed boosts do cap off after 4 decapitations in a single life, but when you have said number of heads and have either of the boots equipped, you move as fast as an average scout and have 210 HP, which, if you know what you're doing, makes you nearly unstoppable. Just don't get cocky, you can still get mowed down by a heavy or various other classes. So why is this melee the lowest on the list? Well, to be fair, I hardly use it anymore. And if you're using this as a pure Demoman, it's your only reliable source of damage, so you're forced to play smart, and depending on the map, cheap. Still, when you have those 4 or so heads and are running around the map charging at completely unexpected saps, you become the most annoying yet feared thing on the server. While random crits is viewed by many as the biggest fault that Team Fortress 2 has, it's not going anywhere. But weapons that can crit given situational circumstances are pretty good and, dare I say, fair. Enter the Bushwalker. Might be a strange choice for the sniper melee, but this thing gives people who don't equip the Girardi an incentive to do so. As you know, Girardi turns regular damage to mini crits toward any enemy doused in it, and the Bushwalker crits whenever it would normally mini crit. It really doesn't take long till you realize just how much of a match these two are. Whenever I play sniper, I always love getting Girardi Bushwalker kills. They're just so satisfying, almost feels like the puff and sting tactic that the Pyro has, and the former ball cleaver tactic that all scout mains everywhere miss ever so much. While that 20% damage vulnerability on wear kind of makes running after Girardi enemies riskier, it does also make those kills just more satisfying. I wish I could say more about this melee, but really that's all there is to it, which is why it's placed so low. Sometimes I really wish I played heavy more, but the sad truth is I just find it to be a boring class, which really makes me sad because that means I can't use these mittens as often as I want to. Yep, I'm one of those guys. Don't worry if you think this is an odd choice, wait till you see my number 1 pick. Really though, these mittens aren't as bad as people make it out to be. Being able to make people laugh with a critical hit is 9 times out of 10 an insta-kill, because then you can taunt kill as soon as your victim breaks into laughter. It's quite humorous if you were to ask me, and is insanely humiliating to the person that just got taunt killed by a mitten wearing heavy. I know that this pair of mittens has gained a reputation of being used solely by friendlies, but don't underestimate them either, they might just catch you off guard. Real talk. I'm not the best soldier. I only play it when my team calls for it, and when I do, I'm not exactly all that useful. Oh well, at least I can still whip people into shape. This isn't the only melee that sacrifices damage output for team help on this list. Guess I just really like helping my team out one way or another, even if I'm completely useless. Anyway, while you do 25% less damage, every time you whip a certain teammate, you and the teammate you just hit gain a generous speed boost for several seconds. This is great for helping slower classes roll out much quicker and for those instances where you don't have an engineer building teleporters and need to reach the front lines quickly. And although the instances aren't common, you can also whip teammates that are on fire, allowing them to reach the health pack just in the nick of time. Also, for some reason, it's not stated anywhere in-game, but this thing has a crazy long melee range, ever so slightly longer than the Eyelander. This explains why you can seemingly hit enemies or teammates from much farther away. It's a nice bonus, and just adds to the awesomeness of this whip, or riding crop. And of course, every time you land a hit with this thing, regardless of what team the person is on, it always plays that iconic whipping sound. All in all, a great supportive melee weapon, and great for soldiers who want to be more of a team player, but above that for soldiers who just can't market guard it. Let's face it, not all of us are fantastic spies, and with the not so recent but still recent Jungle Inferno update, Pyros are still a popular choice by a good chunk of the player base. If only there was a way that allowed me to play Spy for more than 10 seconds without my French pootis being charred. Oh wait, the Spicicle does just that, doesn't it? Like my skill level as a soldier, I'm not exactly the best spy. Not terrible, but nothing great for sure. The Spicicle has recently cut into my heart as my favorite knife that the spy has at his arsenal, which by extension makes it my favorite melee weapon for him. And damn, is it a good one. Aside from the obvious insta-kill backstab that literally every other spy knife can do, the Spicicle allows less competent spies to, you know, play spy. Even if one particle of fire touches you, you're pretty much left without a knife for 15 seconds, or until you find an ammo pack. But as a trade-off, you become fire resistant for 1 second, and afterburn resistant for 10 seconds. Those numbers may sound wimpy, but if you think on your feet, you'd be surprised just how many times you can escape near death. Because of this, I've become a much more competent spy, and I continue to use this knife to this very day because of the great upsides it gives. Pyros are an engineer's best friend. By simply staying around an engineer and his buildings, you'd be surprised how much of a help you can be. Aside from the obvious scare-off spies, you can compression blast incoming Ubers to protect the engineer and his buildings, keep him company in the lonely intel room, and less commonly used for whatever reason, take down those pesky sappers. Now, is this the best melee that the Pyro has? Of course not, but it's just my favorite, and while the post-Blue Moon extinguisher is very nice, I just can't seem to let go of my trusty homewrecker. There's something so heroic about seeing a fellow engineer's buildings getting sapped and you in walking distance holding your trusty homewrecker to literally smash the sapper off the buildings. It doesn't happen often, especially if you're pyroing to begin with. But if a spy somehow runs under your nose, you can simply take him down, and with a single swing of this enlarged sledgehammer, all the worries that the engineer previously had while respawning vanishes. As someone who plays engineer a lot, rebuilding your buildings can get aggravating. And while yes, it is just part of playing engineer, it doesn't hurt to save your fellow engineers the headache occasionally, which is why I've renamed my recently strangified homewrecker the Engineer's Headache Relief. Original? Nah. Fitting? Oh yes. Speaking of engineer, as I just stated, I play engineer a ton, and while building dispensers, sentries, and all that is fun, playing Wrench NG on offense and in some cases defense can be a bit tedious. Good thing the Gunslinger exists though. I've honestly fell in love with this mechanical hand ever since I really started to get into engineering about a year ago. I almost religiously use the Gunslinger on offense, and if the circumstances are right, on defense as well. Getting plus 25 health by simply equipping this is already a great upside, and getting a third swing crit takes some good timing, but when pulled off is extremely satisfying. And of course, who can forget the best downside in Team Fortress 2? Mini sentries. These little monsters allow the engineer to be so much more mobile, and when doing things like capturing control points and pushing the cart, it's a major burden off the engineer's shoulders to stop catering to his high value level 3 sentry. Of course, mini sentries don't do nearly as much damage as even a basic level 1 sentry, but because of their rapid build speed, small form factor, and cheap battle cost, they can be placed in great spots that can pick off unsuspecting enemies or weaken them for your team to finish off, or even as a distraction to get away from a bad situation. I love using the Gunslinger, and although the other wrenches are by no means bad, the Gunslinger gives you the mobility and HP you want, placing as my solid third favorite melee in TF2. Although I don't exactly main as anyone in Team Fortress 2, whenever I don't know who to play as, I almost always gravitate toward Medic. Maybe it's just because I like supporting my fellow teammates and getting them sick kill streaks with my medigun, but there's just something more about playing Medic that makes it a joy to play. But that's a topic for a completely different video and one that's been discussed way too many times. Anyway, my second favorite melee is the Uber Saw. Now if I'm being honest, the stock Bone Saw is my favorite melee for the Medic, but I said no stock weapons, and the Uber Saw is a close second anyway. Seriously, this thing is awesome. Being one of the first non-stock weapons ever added into Team Fortress 2 way back in 2008, it had the same exact stats since then. On hit, 25% overcharge added at a cost of 20% slower swing speed. Surprisingly enough, that 20% slower swing speed isn't that noticeable when you're in a casual pub server, but it's just slow enough to make this saw not a direct upgrade from stock. Moreover, by simply landing a hit on any enemy awards you 25% extra uber. Because of this saw goes very well with the stock medigun as it takes the longest to fully charge without the assistance of a startup time buff, and getting 25% uber by simply whacking someone with this admittedly cool looking saw is an amazing incentive to time your hits just right. And let's not forget that completely awesome taunt kill. No joke, the Spinal Tap is easily my favorite taunt kill in Team Fortress 2, mostly because the medic looks so cool doing it. Not to mention, upon a complete taunt kill or building destruction awards you with 100% overcharge regardless as to how much you had initially. This can be insanely helpful as medic because a well-timed and coordinated uber push can change the tide of so many rounds. However, performing that taunt kill is insanely hard to pull off. Mostly because the medic always screams at the top of his lungs, "I'm going to saw through your bones!" But when you do, it's so rewarding. Literally. And because of all those reasons, this uber great saw makes it as a solid second place on my list. But if this isn't my favorite melee in Team Fortress 2, what is? Through the power of process of elimination, I'm sure most of you have determined that my absolute favorite melee in Team Fortress 2 is for the Scout. So congrats on figuring that out. But my favorite melee may not be a conventional choice to many. So without further stalling, my favorite melee in TF2 is the Rap Assassin. What's so funny? You think I'm joking? No, I'm actually pretty serious. Okay, let me try to explain. So it's really no surprise that this thing sucks. Hands down the worst melee that the Scout has at his disposal. And you'd be right, spot on for that matter. But it doesn't mean it's not fun to use. I know that I'm in an extremely small minority when I say using the Rap Assassin is so much fun. But the ornament recharges modestly fast, and on top of its base 25 damage, it can do a potential 40 bleed damage. But I really don't care about the damage output when I'm using this literal roll of wrapping paper. What makes this thing insanely fun to use is when you actually kill someone with it, and that includes with the ornament or the roll itself. If you're consistent with your aim, you'd be surprised just how often this happens, and if you catch someone off guard and beat them to death with this roll of wrapping paper, well, it's just hilarious to say the least. Probably the only few times where it's appropriate to use the Scout for a taunt. I know it's an absurd reason for not only being my favorite Scout melee, but my favorite melee in the entire game, but it just really gets me. I mean, it may be an awful weapon, but that's sort of why I like it. It's because the kills you get with it are so satisfying and pretty hard to get. I mean, you're beating someone to death with a roll of wrapping paper or by hitting them with a Christmas ornament. If you repeat that thought in your head enough times, it just starts to become so ludicrous and hilarious. I know that there's still going to be some people out there insisting that it still sucks, but all I can say in return is to at least try using it. It'll take some practice for sure, but if you're already aim consistent with the Sandman, It's a pretty good alternative to just mess around as a scout and get some of Team Fortress 2's most humiliating deaths. Thanks for watching.